Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode. As you can see, we're sitting here, Dion and I, about to record a podcast. And so instead of just recording the podcast, we thought that it would be a great idea to record it for all of you as well, because the information that we're going to share today is awesome and something that all of you need to hear. So today, we're going to be actually having a conversation about when to use an egg donor. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, I want to remind you all that if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, that's exactly what you need to do right now is hit subscribe. And if you find the information in this video helpful, then like this video. And if you've got more questions about being an egg donor or using an egg donor, then please leave those comments down below.
Thank you, Dr. Sklar. Yes, I'm Dion, and we're very excited to be here to talk about why someone might want to change over and start thinking about using an egg donor.
So I thought in our conversation, we have a few points that we want to cover today as we're talking about this topic, but I thought the most important piece was this first one, actually, because most couples have been going through their fertility journey, and the only reason you start to think about using an egg donor is because it hasn't worked out for you, right? Yeah. So that's where I thought we would start. What do you think about that?
No, exactly. I think most couples don't start out thinking, oh, I'm going to go straight to egg donor. Most people have had a long journey a long fertility journey trying to conceive and have a healthy baby before they start thinking about egg donor. So definitely one of the primary reasons would be someone who's had multiple failed IVF cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've had multiple failed cycles, and at some point, I guess you can stay on the hamster wheel, right? And keep going. But at some point, you've got to decide where you go from here, and that might be the natural next step, right?
Yeah, especially couples who have maybe tried at a couple different leading fertility centers across the country. They have tried some different protocols as well, and they still may not have had success, or they've had multiple miscarriages, and just haven't been able to bring that healthy baby home from the hospital and building their family. That's a really important time to start thinking about egg donor, and the success is so much higher in the situations when they will consider egg donor.
Yeah, absolutely. Another time, and sometimes I find that this might occur, or they might find this information out before they actually start on the IVF process, or they know it and they still continue down the IVF process and it hasn't worked out. But those with diminished ovarian reserve, those are at the top of the list of individuals or couples that might use donor egg, correct?
Yeah, exactly, Dr. Sklar. It's definitely a lot of women with the diminished ovarian reserve, which can be because of their age, women who are maybe in their 40s. We also do see that more frequently with women who are younger, the premature ovarian insufficiency or premature ovarian failure, where they're young and they already have a very diminished ovarian reserve. And we have especially a lot of athletes coming in.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen that as well in your practice, but definitely seeing a lot of athletes coming in this situation. And so they may be considering egg donation at an even younger age than before.
Yeah, and hopefully those couples have actually tried an IVF cycle or two, or maybe multiple, and haven't been successful, and that's why they're considering this.
So yes, we never want a couple to feel rushed towards egg donation. We want them to have their opportunity to have their babies with their own eggs. But we definitely want people to be aware that this is a possibility and something that can open up many, many, many doors to them building their family.
Absolutely, 100%. And actually another group or population that this would really be important for is gay men. Obviously they don't have eggs, right? So if they want to have a family, and rightly so they should, they need to use donor egg. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And they'll be coming to an egg donation company much earlier in their journey, obviously, since, as you said, they don't produce eggs. So so this opens up the possibility for them to have their own babies and have a genetic connection to their baby, and be able to do that on their own. And I know in the past, some men have felt there have been some barriers there in fertility centers or at certain egg donation or surrogacy companies. So,
In what way? Can you talk about that just a moment?
so I think, we've had some couples who have come who have said they felt much more welcomed at YourEggs, and that there are many more possibilities open to them here, because some fertility centers in the past have focused more on female treatment. So female couples, yes, but not as open to male, since, we have to do the egg donation part as well as the surrogacy part needs to be covered for the male couples.
Got it. Well, and that actually speaks to a second point that I was going to bring up. It's not just about getting the eggs, although obviously we need that.
Yes.
We need the egg
Yes.
donor in this situation, but they also need to have a surrogate as well in those scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step for many of the male couples is to find the right egg donor. And we do have many couples who like to have an egg donor who's willing to maybe even do a second cycle, because they want to make sure that they can have siblings who have a genetic connection through their mom, and that they can use sperm from both partners and use half of the eggs for one of the partners, the other half of the eggs for the other partners, and then have those embryos frozen so that they can then have siblings who are biologically related through their mom. And we, have just recently had a couple who had their second baby related to the other dad.
The second one?
Yes, yeah,
Awesome.
related to their second dad recently. And it's always very exciting to see people being able to build their dream families in the way that they desire. And so we really love working with LGBTQ plus families.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that scenario where they get to have two children, one from each of the fathers, and with the biologically same egg. I mean, that's a beautiful story to tell, and one that I think will mean a lot to them, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, people are definitely coming from different backgrounds to YourEggs, and we really enjoy the opportunity to work with people in the different situations and show them the different possibilities for them.
Yeah, so to me, this is just, those scenarios are just beautiful, right? Like, that's why you want this to happen. But we also have those situations, which brings me to my next point. You also have those situations where they're not ideal situations, right? Where you might have some genetic abnormalities, and that might push a couple to look for a donor as well, because genetically they can't produce a healthy child. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. We recently had a couple who had a baby with cystic fibrosis. So they came to YourEggs in order to use an egg donor to make sure that their sibling would be healthy and not be a carrier of cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, I mean, genetic issues are not super common, so I don't want everyone listening to think that, this is a huge issue and this is a major reason why most people should use an egg donor. It's one of the variables,
Right.
but genetic issues, genetic abnormalities are relatively low or less common, and not one of the main reasons why someone would be coming down this road, although it is a reason that could happen. And so genetically, those individuals need to do some genetic testing on themselves to know if they have any issues, but that's also why there's genetic testing on the egg donor as well, correct?
Right, absolutely. And that's being done for all of our egg donors. And then when intended parents come in, the male partner will also do the genetic screening. For instance, this is rare, but we recently had a couple who the male's genetic abnormality that he had was the same as the donor that they had chosen.
Really?
Yeah, so this is the odds are very small that would
Small,
happen, and this
yeah.
was the first time I had seen that, but they did have to go through and choose another donor to make sure that they would have a genetically healthy baby.
Yeah, but that's actually why we do genetic testing right there, right? So that we know and we don't have to have those unknowns in the future.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So another, potentially unwanted reason to have to go towards egg donor is cancer, right? So if someone has some sort of cancer, especially if they're reproductive based, then egg donor would be an ideal option, or really an option for any of them. Am I accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Many patients, if they undergo radiation or chemotherapy, then, they may be infertile afterwards and not have a healthy egg to use moving forward. And egg donation can really give them the opportunity to have the healthy baby that they desire. We recently had a couple who the woman had overcame breast cancer and thankfully in complete remission and very healthy and very excited to find the right egg donor, and they found a beautiful donor that matched them physically as well as with good academic achievements and an athlete like both the mom and the dad, and they were very excited. And she recently she had her baby I think about 2 months ago.
So fertility preservation is something that I think is really fascinating for me. I think fertility preservation is something that we all need to think about, especially those individuals who are going through cancer treatments or chemotherapy or radiation. So there's a couple different scenarios that I think of, right? That you found out, unfortunately, you've got cancer, and in advance that you want to have children. So you're going to say, well, what can I do to be proactive? And so you're going to either freeze your eggs or your sperm in advance, knowing that after you have treatment, hopefully everything's okay and hopefully you can move forward, right, with that process. But I also know that in certain circumstances, those individuals may have done that. They may have saved and preserved and frozen their eggs, and either they went to go use them and they weren't viable for whatever reason, or they used them all and they still weren't pregnant, and so now they need to turn to an egg donor. So that's one scenario I think about. I mean, we're talking about egg donors, but you could say the same thing about sperm donors in that situation.
Definitely.
And then the other scenario is they were younger and they weren't thinking about fertility preservation. And so then they went through cancer treatments. Then they realized they want to have children later on, to come to find out that because of those interventions that they can't have children. And so that's where they would turn to an egg donor. Have you seen one or both of those scenarios?
Yes, we have had multiple cases of both of those scenarios where we have had people who did proactively freeze their eggs. Thankfully, they were educated on it and had time to do that quickly before undergoing treatment. Actually, the couple I was just talking about, she had I think seven or eight frozen eggs.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they did not have any genetically healthy embryos created from those eggs that they were able to transfer.
So then she had to go to egg donor.
Yes, but we also do have people who did not have a chance. They either didn't have time or didn't have the resources available in the area and wanted to get going on their cancer therapy as soon as possible, of course, and then or didn't know that they wanted to have children later.
Right.
So we definitely have had people in both scenarios come in and be able to build their families through the help of an egg donor. And actually, in that particular case I was talking about, the egg donor was someone whose aunt had breast cancer and recovered from it. So it was especially heartwarming for her to have the chance to help a couple build their family
that's
who
sweet.
had gone through something that she had a family member go through as well.
Yeah, that's sweet to hear. You mentioned something about that woman who had frozen 8 of her eggs, but they weren't viable for whatever reason. To me, this makes me think about how important embryology is as well. So it's not just about taking the steps to freeze your eggs. It's also making sure that it's done with a reputable company and agency who has a really good embryology lab to make sure that's done properly, right? I mean, that's an important piece that most people don't think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important to go with a very large egg donation banking center who has embryologists who are very well trained in both freezing the eggs as well as thawing the eggs, and then all of the fertilization procedures in the lab. And here at YourEggs, Dr. Adams is our medical director and has vast experience doing that in the lab.
Fantastic. So the last piece, or the last point that I think we should bring up today in terms of why someone should consider using an egg donor, for me might sound strange to those listening, but if you're considering adoption, to me, if you're considering adoption, then you should also be considering an egg donor. For all intents and purposes, it's very similar, right? It's theoretically not your genetic makeup, but there's so much more control on your side, when you are using an egg donor and get to hopefully carry that child for those 10 months of pregnancy, versus adopting a child and hoping that everything was healthy and everything was fine and the child's healthy and the parents were healthy, and who knows when you adopt them, right? Are they infants or older? So I think that's really a natural time for those of us who are considering adoption to also consider egg donor.
Yeah, I completely agree that both are wonderful ways to build a family. Egg donation can give parents, depending on what their exact needs are, some more control over the situation. They will have that genetic connection through their male partner, which I know is very important to some couples, where it's not as important to others.
Right.
And then additionally, they will have, that control in the prenatal environment during the pregnancy, as you mentioned, and as well as immediately after the pregnancy.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I often hear from those couples that we support when they're making this decision is, using an egg donor they're not genetically mine. Well, one of the ways we can pass on some of our genetics is actually during the gestation period, right? During the pregnancy, there is a little bit of the genetic makeup that does get passed on to the child. So that is something that you can do in that situation where you couldn't do it during adoption.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting new information that's coming out about that.
Yeah, so these are our 5 reasons why we think someone should be considering using an egg donor. All right, well, that brings this video to conclusion. These are the 5 reasons why you should be considering an egg donor. So I want to hear from all of you now. Which one of these 5 did you think was the most interesting, or a reason why you would consider an egg donor? Comment below and let us know. Additionally, if you have questions about being an egg donor, or if you want to use an egg donor and you have questions, please leave those comments below as well, and we'll do the best we can to answer those for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Sklar, and thank you to everyone. And please reach out to YourEggs so we can answer any questions that you may have.
That's right. If you want more information about YourEggs, then please go to the website at youreggs.com or download the app to start looking for your next egg donor.